want to go over the basics of UVs and UV unwrapping. So, UVs, I wish I could tell you what they stand for. I have to do a little bit of research real quick. Okay, so U and V represent the two-dimensional version, since X, Y, Z were already taken. Basically, when we're working in 2D space, as we'll talk about here in the editor in a moment, UV takes the place of X, Y, and Z in 3D space. So that's what UV stands for. But I want to go over what a UV unwrap is. So as you can see here, when I click on these, and I'll go ahead and put the linked UV syncing selection on, so when I click on something it shows it in 3D. You see how this 3D object, the faces are laid out on a two-dimensional square. The UV is always going to be a square. Now you can use multiple each material has its own UV square, and you can do some different hacks and tricks to sort of fake detail when you're limited by how much space you have in your UV unwrap, stacking UV islands, and etc. But basically your texture for texturing this object has to fit inside this box. And so the box doesn't utilize all the space, but it's still going to look really sharp because it's utilizing most of it, depending on how large your textures are inside those squares. However, bear in mind, a PBR texture set, there's 4 or more, and if they're over 2K, you're going to have a megabyte or so per texture. And so you have to be careful because many projects use a lot of materials, meaning multiple textures. So you have to be careful with that. Try to use fewer materials. Alright, so this is how a sphere is stereotypically laid out. Just walk through each of the way these are laid out by default. That is a very strange unwrapping. I guess that would be the best way to unwrap a shape like that. This is our cylinder. The cone. Not sure I would want to keep that unwrapped, but that's the way it's set up. And then that is the torus. So when I'm unwrapping something, I make a seam here. So now this is free. Okay. So when I've made a seam here, okay, that's that one. So this one is right here. So when I make a seam, the texture stops at this line and it starts fresh on the other side of it. So it's a good way to pull objects apart if you need to. On the other side of a wing, you're going to want to try to push these faces as tightly as you can inside this space. And I have a special packing tool that I use to really make it tight in here. most cases. Then you have to re-unwrap, and so let's cut this in half. Which, depending on what you're doing, might be really helpful. But so same with this. Mark seam, wrap angle based. You see, you get a different unwrap. I actually think this one is better though. So you have to be careful with those seams. It's not going to change your UV unwrap here until you re-unwrap it, but you want to be careful about re-unwrapping because it's going to cause issues with your textures if you happen to avoid a textured anything on them. Because they'll still be objects, but once they're textured, they can look really bad if the texture, the UVs change. So don't mess with the UVs again after you've textured. Fair warning. I know because I have experience. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to put seams here, and then I can unwrap again. And now, this would be really great for things like trim sheets, because you've got a lot of things that are lined up, and you really want to have, this is ideal for most objects. You want to have that straight line, because then you can really get them, you can tighten them up over here, and you can really get them, you can stack these, since this is underneath this, to save space. I'll go ahead and hit vertex snapping, really saving space with how much this is using in the UV space. Same here. I don't know. It's a very strange shape. If you're going to use it though, I think they actually comes by default pretty good. Maybe if I just mark this as a seam and re-unwrap it. Okay, it's going to make this bigger because the majority of the faces are on the top. There's more of them. So you have to experiment with that. Personally, that doesn't look like a common shape I would have to use, but again, something like this. Maybe you want to put the seam there, and then at some point you're going to have to probably cut this. There's one here. Just go along with that. Hit the seam there, unwrap it, and then you're probably not going to want to have it curved like that, so you're going to want to find the tool. UV toolkit is the one I found. It's wonderful. There's two ways to bring this tight. I'm not sure. These seem like they're pretty much the same. But yeah, anyway, that's UVs, guys. The last thing I want to talk about is textile density. So Blender, one of the versions they included multi-object edit mode. So I'll go ahead and select by connected here. And then, alright, so what you're going to want is, see if okay, there is a way to do it. So as you can see, if I select, oops, let's split. Okay. So if I make this one smaller, it takes up less space on the UV square, right? But the texture isn't as detailed. So it still looks okay, but these are sharper, especially if it's not repeating like this. In this case, this grid is. the details aren't going to be sharp because there's not as much space with the available texturing square to put as much detail. And so you want to have these sort of uniform, and so to get the squares the same size, it doesn't look like there's more detail in one area than another. And there's tools to automate that, but that's always been difficult for me, is to figure out how to quickly do that. So that's the basics of textile density. Let's see, and then separate image. Let's see, UV islands. Okay, so I think I had gone over that. So here, if I disconnect this selection here, I have an island here. There's another island. I can select a by island. So that's an object. And these are all just recognized as islands. So when you get clump, let's join all these together. Join one object. All these UV islands are together. If I pack this, it has packed all the stuff in there. Got these different islands, but as you can see, this is using 1K or 1024 by 1024 example texture. These are not the same as at the top. We've got, this is slightly stretched looking. This is going to be spread out more. And so you see now it's equal with that. And so you see how the islands make a difference. So anyway, that's the basics of UVs, guys. I hope it was helpful.